Well, it's been no secret in the theme park realm that Tiana's Bayou Adventure has had its issues with its availability, even whenever it was undergoing ride testing and AP and cast member previews. And a lot of people had hoped, since it opened back in June, that this availability and the consistency of this ride would improve. And while there have been times when it's been a little bit better, it seems as if this ride is still having its issues, and many have wondered, is Disney going to have to do something about this even before this ride is a year old? So we have some stuff to go over today, some articles, some posts on Twitter, and we will talk about this issue. So hi, I'm Jared with Capture the Magic. I have an article here from Blog Mickey, and this is back late July, but we're just going to go through this and then some other interesting posts on Twitter X from people that you may not expect that have some things to say about this ride. So this one here says Tiana's Bayou Adventure just had its worst day yet as operational reliability struggles continue. So earlier this month, it looked like reliability for Tiana's Bayou Adventure was improving, with the attraction experiencing considerably less downtime than it did during previews. From the outside looking in, it appeared that crews had cracked the code and that the attraction would be reliable moving forward. I even thought that Disney would be okay to move forward with opening up the traditional standby queue for the ride. As it turns out, the ride has been having some struggles as of late, and it just had its worst day yet. It says before we talk about the past week, we'll talk about, okay, they go into yesterday, you have some thrill data, which we will go over some thrill data stuff showing how much this ride is not available. It says yesterday, Tiana's Bayou Adventure closed for the day at 4:30 p.m., roughly 5.5 hours before the park closed. There was a brief closure of outdoor attractions yesterday for inclement weather, but that appeared to only be roughly for 30 minutes or so, around 6:45. It says one caveat to the poor Tiana's Bayou Adventure stats is that Big Thunder Mountain appears to have never reopened after 6:45 weather closure. It's unclear if that closure is specific to Big Thunder Mountain Railroad or if it's a wider problem, including Tiana's Bayou Adventure. Regardless, Tiana's Bayou Adventure was closed for more than 2 hours prior to the weather delay, and reports on the ground said that the attraction was drained for the evening. Not great. Of course, one bad day doesn't mean that any ride is struggling per se. To determine reliability, we should try to paint a bigger picture. Over the past week, Tiana's Bayou Adventure has been operational at park opening one time. And that is one thing about this ride, too. It is when park opens, not available sometimes for hours after the rest of the park is open. That's not great, and that alone would disqualify it from moving to a traditional standby queue anytime soon. Tiana's Bayou Adventure is a headliner attraction, maybe. And if your headliner cannot consistently be open at rope drop, it should not utilize a standby queue. As I'm writing this article, Tiana's Bayou Adventure is still not open for the day. While yesterday was its worst day as a whole, July 16th was the worst start to a day that Tiana's Bayou had ever had. On the 16th, Tiana's Bayou Adventure didn't open until 1:15 p.m. So that's more than 4 hours of downtime to start the day. Again, inconsistency and unreliability will be what keeps Tiana's Bayou Adventure utilizing virtual queue far longer than Disney World originally intended, which is why they do that, because if a ride breaks down and it's a traditional queue, you have to, everybody in that queue has to get out. And then at that point, they probably have to give everybody, an anytime sort of fast pass. I'm just going to call it fast pass. That's what I know it as. Versus if you have, the standby queue, a virtual queue, the boarding groups just get paused and you don't have to, you don't have to evacuate an entire queue of people. They did the same thing for like Rise of the Resistance for the longest time because of that reason. So the thing that's obvious, but at least worth pointing out, Disney World did not plan on using the virtual queue this long. Prior to the ride opening, Disney World said they would be utilizing a virtual queue during the initial opening days. The ride opened on June 28th, so my thought was that they would want to use the virtual queue through the July 4th holiday at the longest of crowds materialized. As it turns out, crowds were low again this year for the 4th of July, so there was little reason to keep the virtual queue from a crowd perspective. At this point, the attraction needs to keep the virtual queue until it's reliable. With the virtual queue, Disney World can manage guest expectations by slowing down the boarding group callback time if the ride is having operational struggles. I don't think that manages guest expectations at all, though. The problem with that is a guest is expecting to be able to ride this ride. I guess a virtual queue helps in terms of not having to evacuate an entire ride. And I suppose if it's down, guests will know that it's down, but it doesn't change the fact that guests will expect to ride this ride, or that want to ride this ride maybe can't. I personally don't think that does that at all. If 15,000 people per day are riding Tiana's Bayou Adventure, Disney World can use the boarding groups to make sure they are spaced out throughout the day instead of surging at rope drop. It says when the attraction may not be open or at busy peaks during the afternoon. I'll just point out, as other people will, that we'll check out in a minute. You never had this issue. I mean, Splash Mountain had its issues, but not like this. So Splash Mountain never had a virtual queue, and for the most part, it didn't have you know the unreliability issues. So it's like the spacing the crowds out sort of thing. This is new to this ride. We'll just say that. I'll close by saying this. I didn't want to write another article about Tiana's Bayou Adventure reliability. Instead, I'd love nothing more for the next article I write to be about Disney opening up the traditional standby queue and the attraction settling into a good operational flow. Unfortunately, that hasn't been the case. Disney World had previously announced that Tiana's Bayou Adventure would open up for the standby queue for Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party, but that's probably less of a comment on attraction reliability and more of a comment about crowd levels and desire to ride attractions during a party where there is so much more to do. Very true. Hopefully, Disney World is able to figure out the right issues for Tiana's Bayou Adventure soon, but 3 weeks on with no obvious improvement likely signals that the issues are a bit more complex than a quick fix would allow for. Which brings to the obvious question: why was this ride opened with these issues going on when these issues were persistent in AP previews, cast member previews? I'm sure they knew these issues were going on as they were testing this ride. I'm shocked that they would open a ride in this state. I'm sure this has something to do with the leadership saying, hey, this needs to open on time no matter what. But I feel like this is a worse look for Disney on having a ride that's, not reliable versus a ride opening late that actually works. I've been saying this for a while now, but we have some other people that are saying some things as well. One of the people that, basically, this guy built his entire Twitter X account off of this ride being built and wanting it to be a success. You would call this as somebody who is a fanboy of this ride. But that's fine. If people want to be fanboys of rides at theme parks, there's nothing wrong with that. But even he is being critical of this. He says, Tiana's Bayou Adventure continues to suffer from the heaviest technical difficulties yet. I went on the attraction for the first time 2 months ago today, and it was one of the happiest moments of my life. Yet these issues can't be ignored. My 26th ride last night was the worst state I've ever seen it in, and it's operating in an even worse state today with the audio animatronics figures freezing and resetting while guests were riding. I love this attraction more than any other, yet I'm at the point now where I'm even having a hard time enjoying it when my favorite parts of it aren't working correctly. This attraction, in my opinion, truly is a joyful celebration when everything is working correctly, yet that's not reality right now. I'm sad to see it in this state and hope to see the issues addressed immediately so everyone can fully enjoy the beautiful experience that it is. So this person saying this, and they're putting it in a very nice way. I'll just put it that way. That's not the best sign, because even this, even people that are wanting, have every, I guess, motivation to say nothing but glowing things about it. People that genuinely like this ride are not happy in the state that it is in. This ride is it's a mess. It just is a mess right now. This account's pretty funny. Mama Odie is an incredibly advanced animatronic. Love or hate Bayou. That's just a fact. In fact, she's so advanced. She reminds me of the Yeti on Expedition Everest in more ways than one. So this is satire because the animatronic is frozen. And if you know anything about Expedition Everest, the Yeti on that ride has not been working since basically the park opened. And what they did was, instead of fixing it, they basically put a strobe light on it. So it's an animatronic that does not work, that they use strobe lights to give the effect that it's doing something. This person, Walt Goat, says Disco Odie coming soon. Again, that's pretty funny take on it, but a lot of the animatronics on this ride are just not working. And Disney Glimpses, who's a good follow on Twitter X, has been saying some good things lately. So the big problem here, in my opinion, is leadership. I have worked for many large corporations, and I couldn't in my wildest dreams imagine these difficulties being considered acceptable for even a single day. How is this possibly still allowed to happen? And I think that's the thing that comes about this is, in my opinion, there's been a drastic decline in the quality that the Walt Disney Imagineering is putting out. Now, whether that's because of people leaving, whether that's because of leadership, it's probably a mix of both. And a lot of, I think at the end of the day, this comes from leadership. That's how companies run. Obviously they set the culture. And I do feel like this ride was just put out here the way it is because leadership didn't want to say it needs to be delayed, or they didn't want to spend the money to fix the issues, or they didn't think these issues, I guess they just maybe thought the issues would just go away. I don't really know. When you clearly have a problem with a ride and yet you still open it, I don't really understand that logic. Unless whoever is telling them this stuff is just not being truthful, or they don't know the actual issue. But either way, that still doesn't alleviate the problem with the ride. And especially, again, I'm not going to act like Splash Mountain never had its issues, but Splash Mountain was it's much more basic on the animatronics. They kind of ran through a loop. This one's using a lot of sensors and trying to do a different type of experience, which I applaud that effort in that way. But if it's not working, at the very least, it should have a B mode where it just these things revert back to maybe how Splash Mountain operated in terms of the animatronics just go on a loop. But one of the things about Splash Mountain that other people have pointed out, was there really a need to replace Splash Mountain? Given when we look at there's a study that was done. This is on magicguides.com, but there's a study done that talks about how Splash Mountain was the most popular ride at Walt Disney World. And there's a lot of, I mean, this is obviously like, there's no set, like, this was for sure it, but different things you check out, Travel Advisor, other ones. Splash Mountain, at the very least, was one of the most popular rides at all of Disney World, especially Magic Kingdom. So you had a ride that was already popular, on top of the fact that if you look at how much it costs, and this is from Forbes here, to convert Tiana's Bayou Adventure, or Splash Mountain to Tiana's Bayou Adventure, it costs $142 million. So you would assume when you're redoing a ride and you're redoing the overlay, you would also go in and fix the issues that this ride had. But seemingly this ride didn't fix the previous issues and just added new issues on top of it. Now, again, we could sit here all day and say, how does this happen? Why? I think you're talking giant corporations. Like, there's just levels of uh, weird decisions, I guess you could say, when you get into big corporations. But I guess the real question comes into, what happens with Tiana's Bayou Adventure? Do they just leave it as it is and it's just this unreliable ride that from the get-go is just, sometimes it runs, sometimes it doesn't? I feel like that's a really bad look. The thing that you could be looking at is, do they shut this ride down, especially in the wintertime here coming up? Because, it's not that popular when it's colder. And it does get cold in Florida. I live in Florida. You talk about the months of, November to March. It's not, I'm not going to say cold, but, it'll get into the 50s and 60s, and people typically don't want to ride water rides in those temperatures. Do they use that lower demand time, or expected lower demand for this ride, to fix these problems? I kind of feel like they probably should. And again, if they opened this ride early when it wasn't ready because they didn't want the bad press, or they wanted to open it on time, I feel like it's a way worse look for you to have this new ride that opened in June, for it then to have to go down for a refurbishment to fix the issues with it in the same year, that to fix problems that should have been fixed in the first place. And how much would that cost? Like, what are these issues you're looking at? We already saw from Forbes here. You're already looking at $142 million to redo this ride. How much more money is it going to cost to fix the ongoing issues with it? But I feel like Tiana's Bayou Adventure is a microcosm of a lot of the issues that have been going on at Disney World. And honestly speaking, what I really want is for Disney to get back to the things they used to do. And I feel like years ago, they would have taken the time and said, okay, this ride isn't ready. Let's delay it. Let's fix it. And then let's present it, where guests can rely on it. And it's a ride that you can advertise easily about. Because if you're advertising about coming check out this new ride, someone comes for this ride and it's down, even for one day. I mean, I understand rides go down, but when you have a ride that's consistently having these downtime issues, I just feel like that's way worse press than delaying a ride and fixing the overall issues with it. And unfortunately, a lot of this has dealt into, again, which I hate seeing into the theme parks, of people who like Splash Mountain are viewed bad, as they're bad people, and people that like Tiana's are viewed as bad people. Again, we're talking theme parks here. I don't think anybody's bad for liking a ride one way or the other, but I do think this ride was one, if you're talking about the amount of money spent on this, and what Disney has gotten the return out of it, I think you can bring into question, was it really money well spent, given that's money that could have been used in a lot of other places that probably need it in the parks. But in terms of, with this ride, it's going to be Tiana's Bayou Adventure. I don't believe Disney anytime soon is going to retrofit this back to Splash Mountain. In this iteration of Disney, there's no way that it's going to happen. I suppose in the far off future, there's always a chance that it could happen, but I wouldn't hold my breath. But at the end of the day, I think that Disney needs to address this issue, fix whatever the problem with this is, and present a ride to guests that they are able to actually enjoy, and not have the biggest excitement about the ride being whether or not they're going to be able to ride it or not. I think the thrill of a ride should be the ride itself, and not, oh, hey, we didn't get escorted off. That's great. But that's going to do it for this video. If you like this video, please like it and subscribe to the channel. We do lots of coverage here of Universal Studios, Disney World, Epic Universe, and pop culture news. And let us know in the comments, do you think that Disney ends up refurbishing this ride very soon to fix these issues, or do you think they're just going to let this run and see how it goes into the future? And until next time, we will see you in the parks.